The city tested all 114 sirens on June 4. The all-clear sounded at 11:32 a.m. By 11:47, the system logged every unit as returned to standby. Siren 077 did not return to standby. Siren 077 had not been activated. I need to explain what that means, because the people I've told this to, the ones who listened long enough, always stall at the same place. They hear a siren went off, and they picture a malfunction. A stuck relay. A corroded solenoid. Something mechanical and tedious. Something that gets fixed with a work order and a Tuesday morning. That is not what happened. My name is Darren Yates. For 3 years I worked as a field technician for the Sedgwick County Office of Emergency Communications in Wichita, Kansas. My team, and I want to emphasize team, because this was never a one-person operation, consisted of 9 full-time techs and 2 supervisors covering 114 outdoor warning sirens across a 600-square-mile service area. During storm season, April through June, we also coordinated with National Weather Service Wichita, the county sheriff's dispatch, and the city's 911 center. We reported to the OEC director, Linda Foss, who reported to the county manager. Everything I'm about to describe happened within a real, functioning, multi-agency public safety system staffed by people who took the work seriously. The 6 rules weren't written in any manual. They were operational norms, things you learned in your first season, passed along verbally by whichever senior tech rode with you during your orientation weeks. My orientation tech was Carmen Reyes, who'd been with the department 11 years. She didn't call them rules. She called them, how we don't waste time. The first was simple, you don't service a siren during an active watch. Not a warning, not a watch. Even a watch. You pack up and you leave. This seems obvious, but new techs always want to finish the job. Carmen's version was blunt, the sky doesn't care about your work order. The second, you always radio dispatch when you arrive at a siren location and when you leave. Even if you're just doing a visual check. Even if you're there for 4 minutes. You call in and you call out. The third, if a siren activates while you are physically at the pole, you do not silence it manually. You leave. You drive at least a quarter-mile away, and then you call dispatch to confirm whether the activation was authorized. You do not touch the unit while it is sounding. The fourth, during monthly tests, you monitor from the vehicle. You do not stand beneath a siren that is being remotely activated. This is partly a hearing protection issue. The Federal Signal 2001 at full cycle hits 124 decibels at 100 feet, but Carmen said it differently. She said, you don't put your body inside the sound. The fifth, if a siren shows a fault code you don't recognize, you document it and leave. You don't troubleshoot unfamiliar faults in the field. You bring it back to the shop and look it up. The sixth was the one I broke. Carmen told it to me on my 3rd day while we were parked outside Siren 041, near the east bank of the Arkansas River. She'd been quieter than usual that morning. We'd been running post-test diagnostics, confirming that the May rotation test had cycled every unit properly. She pulled up 041's log on the laptop, stared at it for a long time, and then said, if a siren you did not activate is producing sound below the audible test threshold, if you can feel it but not hear it, you leave. You don't document it. You don't try to measure it. You leave, and you tell me, and no one else. I asked her why. She said, because twice in my career I've had techs who didn't, and both of them are gone. Not dead. Not fired. Gone. I remember laughing. Not at her. Carmen was not a person you laughed at, but at the framing. It sounded like a hazing story. The kind of thing every trade has. Don't go in the basement after midnight. Don't open the third locker. I'd been an HVAC tech for 6 years before this job. I'd heard 100 versions. Carmen didn't laugh. She closed the laptop, started the truck, and we drove to the next site in silence. I want to describe what the work was actually like, because the texture of it matters. Wichita is flat. Not rolling hills flat, geometrically flat. You can see a siren pole from 2 miles out on a clear day. The units are mounted on 40-foot galvanized steel poles, usually in parks, school grounds, or municipal right-of-way parcels near residential neighborhoods. Each siren is a Federal Signal 2001 SRN or a Whelan WPS 2900 series, depending on when it was installed. The older Federal Signals have electromechanical rotors. The newer Whelans are all electronic, no moving parts, just an array of directional speakers. Servicing them is straightforward. You check the battery backup, test the manual activation switch, inspect the housing for weather damage, verify the radio receiver is tuned and responsive, and run a diagnostic cycle at reduced volume. Twice a year you do a full mechanical inspection, bearings, mounts, conduit integrity, grounding rods. It's methodical. Repetitive. You develop a rhythm. The rhythm is important because that's how you notice when something is off. You visit each siren on a rotating schedule. You know what they sound like, what they look like, how the housing sits on the pole. You know that 023 has a loose latch on the control box that you have to flip twice. You know that 089 picks up interference from the cell tower 300 yards south and throws a false comm fault every few months. You know your sirens. I knew mine. My primary coverage area was the northeast quadrant, 29 units from siren 060 through 088, roughly covering the neighborhoods from town east north to Park City. I could tell you the color of the fence at every site. I could tell you which ones had shade and which ones cooked you in July. Siren 077 was in Coulter Park, a mid-sized municipal park with a soccer complex, a playground, and a community pool that opened Memorial Day. The siren was mounted at the northwest corner of the parking lot, next to a maintenance shed. It was a 2001 SRN, installed in 2009, in decent shape. I'd serviced it maybe 15 times. Routine unit. No history of faults. On June 4th, the county ran its monthly test at 11:30 a.m. All 114 units were activated simultaneously from the central console at the 911 center, ran a full 3-minute cycle, and were deactivated. The all clear was logged at 11:32. By 11:47, the system showed all units back in standby mode. I wasn't in the field that day. I was at the shop doing inventory. Carmen was out on the south side doing post-test spot checks. Everything was normal. At 2:14 p.m., I got a call from dispatch. A resident on Edgemore, about 600 feet south of Coulter Park, had called 911 to report that the tornado siren near the soccer fields has been going off and on for the last hour. Dispatch asked if we had any scheduled maintenance at that location. We didn't. They asked me to drive out and check. I arrived at 2:38 p.m. I called dispatch, logged my arrival, and walked toward the pole. The siren was not sounding. No audible output at all. No rotation. No electronic tone. It was a clear day, 81 degrees, wind out of the south at maybe 8 miles per hour. perfectly quiet. I opened the control box. Battery was full. Receiver was on standby. Activation log showed the 11:30 test cycle and nothing else. No faults. No alerts. I ran a diagnostic on the receiver, clean. I checked the manual switch, off. I checked the rotor, stationary, no signs of recent movement. I radioed dispatch and reported the unit as nominal. Probable false report, maybe someone hearing a different siren from across the highway, or a car alarm, or construction equipment. It happens. People hear what they expect to hear during storm season. Dispatch thanked me. I logged my departure at 2:51 p.m. At 5:20 p.m., same resident called back. Same complaint. Siren going off and on. This time she was more specific, it's not the regular sound. It's lower. Like it's trying to start but can't. Dispatch sent me back. I arrived at 5:33 p.m. Same result. Completely silent. Completely nominal. I spent 20 minutes this time, running every diagnostic in the field kit. Nothing. But as I was packing up, standing about 15 feet from the base of the pole, I felt something. Not heard. Felt. A pressure in my sternum. A thickness in the air that had no sound attached to it. Like standing too close to a subwoofer that someone has turned down to 0 volume but left powered on, you can feel the driver moving, pushing air, but there's nothing to hear. I stopped. I put my hand on the pole. The steel was vibrating. It was faint. A low, rhythmic tremor that I could feel in my palm but not in my feet. The vibration was in the pole itself, not transmitted through the ground. I pressed my ear against it. Nothing audible. But the vibration was steady. Pulsed. Maybe a 2-second cycle, swell, fade, swell, fade. I stood there for a long time. Long enough that the shadows shifted. Long enough that I became aware of how quiet the park was. The soccer fields were empty. The parking lot had 3 cars in it, none of them near me. A woman was walking a dog on the path near the pool. A normal Tuesday afternoon. I should have left. Carmen's rule, the 6th one, was designed for exactly this. Subaudible output from an unactivated siren. Leave. Don't document it. Don't try to measure it. Tell her and no one else. Instead, I opened my field kit and pulled out the sound level meter. I held it at the base of the pole. The display read 38 dB, ambient background noise. Normal for a suburban park. I moved it up to the control box. Same reading. I held it directly beneath the siren head, arm extended. 38 dB. But the pole was vibrating. I could feel it. I put my bare hand on the steel and the meter in the other hand against the same surface and watched the display. 38 dB. Exactly. Not fluctuating. Not 37.8 or 38.3. A flat, digital 38.0, holding steady while the steel shook against my palm. I have worked with sound measurement equipment for 9 years across 2 careers. A sound level meter pressed against a vibrating steel surface does not read flat ambient. It picks up the structural vibration as contact noise. The reading should have jumped at least 10 or 15 decibels, probably more. Mine didn't move. I pulled my hand off the pole. The vibration stopped. I put my hand back. It started again. Same rhythm. Same 2-second cycle. I pulled my hand off. It stopped. Meter reading, 38.0 dB. Steady. Unchanging. I packed up my equipment, drove to the parking lot exit, and sat in my truck for 11 minutes. I know because I watched the clock on the dashboard. I was not frightened. I was trying to figure out what kind of equipment malfunction could produce a contact-responsive vibration in a steel pole that didn't register on a calibrated meter. I couldn't think of one. I still can't. I drove to Carmen's house. She lived in a small ranch off South Hydraulic, about 20 minutes from the shop. I'd been there once before for a team barbecue. She answered the door in sweatpants and a Wichita State shirt, and I could tell from her face that she already knew what I was going to say. "Which one?" she asked. 077, Coulter Park. She closed her eyes. Opened them. "Did you measure it?" "Yes." "Darren." "I know." "Did it read flat?" I didn't answer, because the fact that she already knew the answer told me something I wasn't ready to process. She let me in. We sat at her kitchen table and she poured 2 glasses of water and didn't drink hers. Then she told me what she knew, and I'm going to relay it as accurately as I can, because Carmen was precise and I've gone over this conversation in my mind hundreds of times. She said that in her 11 years, 3 sirens had exhibited this behavior. The first was Siren 019, near Friends University, in 2016. A tech named Paul Montoya had been doing a routine inspection and reported a mechanical vibration with no acoustic output. He'd measured it. Flat reading. He'd reported it to the supervisor at the time, who told him to file a maintenance request and move on. Paul filed the request. He went back 2 days later to follow up. Carmen said Paul completed his follow-up visit. His truck was found in the parking lot at the end of the day with his tools packed neatly in the bed and his field log completed through the 019 entry. His radio was on the passenger seat. His phone was in the cup holder. Paul Montoya was never seen again. No body. No note. No financial activity. His family filed a missing persons report. The police investigated. There was no evidence of foul play. His file is still open. The second siren was 034, near the Sedgwick County Zoo, in 2019. This time it was a tech named Rena Okafor, 3 years into the job. She'd reported the same thing, contact-responsive vibration, flat meter reading, no audible output. Unlike Paul, Rena told Carmen first. Carmen told her to stay away from 034. Rena agreed. She stayed away for 2 weeks. Then she went back. Carmen didn't know why. Rena's GPS log showed her driving to the 034 site on a Saturday morning when she wasn't on shift. She'd used her department key to open the control box. Her field log, found in the truck, showed a single entry, 034, responsive. Sustained contact 3 minutes, output confirmed. Not acoustic. Not acoustic. Rena Okafor went home that Saturday. Carmen spoke to her on the phone that evening. Rena was calm, coherent. She said she understood something she hadn't understood before, and she needed to go back one more time. Carmen told her not to. Rena said, "I know. But it's not what you think it is." Sunday morning, Rena drove to the zoo parking lot. Her truck was found in the same spot. Tools packed. Field log completed. Phone in the cup holder. Key on the seat. Rena Okafor has never been found. Carmen watched me while she told me this. She was not performing. She was not embellishing. She was delivering the information the way she delivered everything, flatly, completely, without editorializing. Paul measured it, she said. Rena measured it. You measured it. The rule exists for a reason. What reason? I said. What is it actually doing? I don't know. And I've spent 6 years making sure I don't find out. I asked her if she'd reported any of this to Linda Foss or the county manager. She said she'd reported Paul's disappearance through normal channels. The police handled it. The department hired a replacement. As for the siren behavior itself, she said she'd filed a maintenance flag on 019 and 034 recommending both units be taken offline and inspected at the factory. Both requests were approved. Both sirens were pulled, sent to Federal Signals facility in University Park, Illinois, disassembled, tested, and returned. Both came back clean. No mechanical fault. No electrical anomaly. No structural defect. Certified operational and reinstalled. And the vibration? I asked. Gone, she said. After they were reinstalled, both units tested normal. No contact response. No subaudible output. Nothing. So it stopped. At those two, yes. But then it started at 034 3 years later. And now it's at 077. I sat with that for a while. 3 sirens across 8 years. 3 techs, including me, who'd made direct contact with the vibration. 2 of them gone. And a pattern that moved between units with no mechanical explanation. What do you think it is? I asked. Carmen shook her head. I think there's something that uses the sirens. Not the electronics, not the rotors, not the power system. The pole. The physical steel. And I think when you touch it while it's active, it learns you. And when it's learned you enough, it invites you back. Invites you to what? That's the question I don't want answered. I left Carmen's house at 8:40 p.m. I drove home to my apartment in Riverside, a second-floor 1-bedroom above a dry cleaner. My girlfriend, Nessa, was already asleep. I sat on the couch and opened my laptop and tried to write down everything Carmen had told me, and I found that my hands were shaking. Not from fear. From recognition. Because when I'd had my hand on that pole, feeling the vibration pulse against my palm, I had not wanted to let go. I had told myself I was investigating. Running diagnostics. Being thorough. But the truth was that the vibration felt intentional. Directed. Like something pressing back against my hand from inside the steel. And when I finally pulled away, the absence of it was worse than the presence. I didn't go back to Coulter Park. Not the next day. Not that week. I followed Carmen's rule, belatedly, incompletely, but I followed it. I serviced my other 28 sirens and I stayed away from 077. But I want to be honest about what happened during that week, because it's the part that doesn't fit any explanation I've been able to construct. On Wednesday, June 6, 2 days after my contact with 077, I was servicing Siren 071 in Plainview, a neighborhood about 4 miles south of Coulter Park. Routine battery check. I opened the control box, connected the tester, and waited for the voltage reading. While I was waiting, I put my hand on the pole. Habit. You lean on things. You touch your equipment. It's unconscious. The pole was vibrating. Same rhythm. Same 2-second cycle. Same contact responsive onset. It started when I touched it and stopped when I pulled away. 071 was a Whelan 2900. Different manufacturer. Different mounting system. Different year of installation. The only thing it shared with 077 was that it was a steel pole with a siren on top and I was touching it. I pulled my hand away. Stared at it. Put it back. Vibration. I checked the meter. 41 dB, slightly higher ambient due to the nearby road. Flat. Steady. Non-responsive to the contact vibration I could physically feel in my bones. I pulled away, packed up, and left without completing the service. I drove to the next site, Siren 074, in a church parking lot off North Oliver. I did not touch the pole. I serviced the control box with gloves, which I had never done before. I was careful. Methodical. When I was closing the box, my elbow brushed the pole. Vibration. Instant. Same pattern. I jerked away like I'd touched a hot stove. I sat in my truck and called Carmen. It's at 071, I said. And 074. Silence on the line. Carmen. Were you touching them? Yes. Darren, it's not at 071 and 074. It's at you. I didn't understand what she meant. Or I did, and I didn't want to. Paul measured it once, she said. Rena measured it once. After that, they could feel it at any siren they touched. Not because it had moved. Because they'd become, I don't know the right word. Tuned. Matched. Whatever frequency that thing operates at, once you make sustained contact, your body starts resonating with it. And then every pole feels the same. That's not possible. I know. Carmen, that's not how vibration works. That's not how any physical system works. I know. Then what? I told you. The rule exists for a reason. You don't measure it. You don't touch it. You don't put your body inside the sound. There is no sound. That's the whole point. Yes, she said. That's the whole point. I went home early that day. I told dispatch I was feeling sick, which was not entirely untrue. I sat on my couch and I held my hands out in front of me and I watched them. They were steady. No tremor. No visible vibration. But I could feel it. Not in my hands. In my chest. The same 2-second pulse, swell, fade, that I'd felt in the pole at Coulter Park. Except now it wasn't coming from outside. It was coming from my sternum, from the flat bone at the center of my rib cage, radiating outward through my ribs like a tuning fork struck and held against my body from the inside. Nessa came home at 6. She's a dental hygienist, steady and practical, the kind of person who deals with problems by identifying them and solving them in order. She knew something was wrong immediately, because I was sitting in the dark. Darren. I'm fine. Just a headache. She sat next to me. She put her hand on my chest. Your heart's doing something weird, she said. What do you mean? Feel. She took my hand and placed it where hers had been. I felt it. My heartbeat. normal rate, normal strength. But between each beat, in the space where there should have been silence, there was a second pulse. Fainter. Slower. A rhythm underneath my rhythm that didn't belong to me. 2-second cycle. Swell, fade, swell, fade. You should see a doctor, Nessa said. Yeah, I said. Probably. I didn't see a doctor. I went back to work. I wore gloves every day. I did not touch any siren pole with my bare skin. I completed my routes. I filed my reports. I was functional. Professional. The pulse in my chest didn't stop. It didn't get stronger, either. It just persisted, a passenger frequency riding beneath my heartbeat like a radio station bleeding through from an adjacent channel. I could feel it when I was still. When I was moving, working, talking, it faded into the background. But every night, lying in bed next to Nessa, I could feel it. Swell. Fade. Swell. Fade. On June 11th, 1 week after my contact with 077, I was doing a visual inspection of Siren 082 in a park north of K96. I stayed in the truck. Binoculars. Checked the housing, the mount, the conduit. Everything looked fine. I logged it and moved on. As I was pulling out of the parking lot, my radio clicked. Not dispatch. Not Carmen. Not anyone on our frequency. The radio clicked, the sound it makes when someone keys a mic but doesn't speak. A brief burst of carrier signal, then silence. I checked the channel. We operated on a dedicated UHF frequency, encrypted, assigned by the county. No one else should have been transmitting on it. I keyed my mic. Dispatch, Yates. Did you just transmit? Negative, Yates. No outgoing from this console. Copy. I drove to my next site. The radio clicked again. And again. 6 clicks over the next 40 minutes, evenly spaced, while I drove between 3 siren locations. I reported each one to dispatch. They ran a diagnostic on the repeater. Clean. They checked for interference. None. They asked if anyone else on the team was transmitting. No one was. The click stopped when I parked at the shop at the end of my shift. The next day, they started again the moment I pulled out of the parking lot. Same pattern. Evenly spaced. No voice. No data burst. Just a carrier signal, held for about 1 second, then released. Like someone pressing a button. Or like something testing whether the channel was open. I told Carmen. She listened without interrupting, then said, "Don't respond to them." I'm not. I mean, don't respond to them as if they're communication. Don't count them. Don't time them. Don't try to figure out the pattern. The moment you start treating them as a signal, you're in a conversation. A conversation with what? Carmen looked at me the way she'd looked at me in her kitchen. Patient, tired, and deeply certain. With whatever is in the polls, she said. Whatever you let in when you held on. That night, Nessa was working late. I was alone in the apartment. I was sitting on the couch, not watching television, just sitting. The pulse in my chest was steady. The room was silent. And then, very faintly, I heard it. Not from outside. Not from the walls or the ceiling or any physical source. From inside my hearing, like a tinnitus tone, except it wasn't a tone. It was a rhythm. The same 2-second cycle. But now it had texture, a low, granular quality, like sand moving through a pipe. Like thousands of tiny impacts happening simultaneously in a pattern that averaged out to a smooth wave. I stood up. Walked to the window. Looked out at the street. 3 blocks away, I could see the top of Siren 091, not one of mine, not in my quadrant, but visible from my apartment. It was motionless. Dark. Inactive. The sound in my head pulsed. Swell. Fade. I stared at 091. The sound pulsed. I closed the blinds. The sound continued. I put on headphones and played music. The sound continued underneath the music, like a foundation beneath a building. You couldn't hear it directly, but everything above it was subtly shaped by it. I took the headphones off. I stood in the center of my apartment and I said, out loud, to no one, "What do you want?" The sound stopped. Complete silence. For the first time in 7 days, the subaudible pulse, in my chest, in my hearing, in whatever medium it was actually occupying, was gone. The relief was so immediate and so physical that my knees buckled and I sat down on the floor. And then, in the silence, my radio, sitting on the kitchen counter, powered on but tuned to our department frequency, clicked. Once. I didn't move. It clicked again. And then a voice. Not a human voice. Not a synthesized voice. A sound that used the radio speaker the way a person might use a musical instrument. It wasn't speech, but it was organized. It had cadence. It had emphasis. It rose and fell in a pattern that my brain desperately wanted to interpret as language. It lasted about 4 seconds. Then the radio went silent. I sat on the floor and I stared at the radio and the pulse came back, in my chest, in my head, in the air, and I understood something that I could not articulate then and can barely articulate now. The vibration in the poles was not a malfunction. It was not a haunting. It was not a phenomenon. It was a voice. Something was using the steel, the physical, structural steel of 114 siren poles sunk into the bedrock of Sedgwick County, as a vocal apparatus. And it had been trying to speak for years. And the reason it was subaudible was not that it was too quiet. It was that it was speaking in a medium that steel could transmit but air could not carry. And when I'd pressed my hand against the pole, I'd become a bridge. A transducer. Something that could receive the vibration in one medium and, through my bones, my tissue, my nervous system, translate it into something that could almost reach my ears. The 6 rules suddenly made terrible sense. Not as safety protocols. As containment. As a way of keeping every technician in the county from accidentally becoming a listening device for something that had been trying to talk to us through our own infrastructure since the poles went into the ground. I called Carmen. It was 11:40 p.m. It spoke, I said. Long pause. On the radio. Yes. What did it say? I don't know. It wasn't, I couldn't, Carmen, it wasn't words. But it was structured. It was trying. Did you answer? No. Good. Carmen, what happens if someone answers? She was quiet for so long I thought the call had dropped. Paul answered, she said finally. Rena answered. I know because Rena told me. She said she answered it and it answered back, and what it said was, she said it was like being shown a room. Not told about one. Shown one. A place that was inside the sound. And she said it was the most beautiful thing she'd ever experienced and she needed to go back. A room inside the sound. That's what she said. And then she went to the pole and disappeared. Yes. Carmen, where did she go? Into the room, Darren. I think she went into the room. I didn't sleep that night. The pulse ran through me like a second circulatory system. Every time I closed my eyes, I could feel it mapping me, not in a predatory way, not with malice, but with the thoroughness of something that had been alone for a very long time and had finally found a surface that could hear it. The next day I went to work. I did my route. I wore gloves. I did not touch the poles. At 1:15 p.m., parked outside Siren 068, I looked at the pole through the windshield and the pulse in my chest synchronized with something I could see, a faint, rhythmic distortion in the air around the steel, like heat shimmer, except the temperature was 74 degrees and there was no thermal gradient that could produce it. The shimmer pulsed. My chest pulsed. Same rhythm. Same cycle. I looked at the pole and the shimmer intensified. I looked away and it faded. My attention was the variable. Not my touch anymore. My attention. I drove to the shop. I found Carmen in the bay, working on a replacement rotor. I closed the door. I can see it now, I said. Not just feel it. I can see something around the poles. A shimmer. It responds to whether I'm looking at it. Carmen put down her wrench. She sat on the workbench and she looked older than I'd ever seen her. That's what Rena said. Week 2. Week 2 of what? Of the progression. Paul, it took about 10 days from first contact to the radio event. Rena, about 8. You're on day 8. The visual component usually starts around day 10 to 14. You're ahead of schedule. Schedule. I don't mean, Darren, there is no schedule. There's no document. There's no study. There's me, sitting in this shop for 11 years, watching this happen 3 times and keeping notes on a legal pad that I hide in my truck because I am afraid that if it gets into any system, any computer, any file, any official channel, it becomes real in a way that I can't manage. You've been tracking this alone. Who would I tell? Linda Foss, who would refer it to the county manager, who would refer it to legal, who would conclude that I'm having a mental health episode and put me on leave. The police, who investigated 2 missing persons and found nothing. The manufacturer, who disassembled 2 sirens and found nothing. She was right. There was no institutional pathway for this. The system we operated inside was built to manage equipment, weather, and public safety. It had no architecture for a phenomenon that existed between the physical and the perceptual, that left no trace on any instrument, and that only manifested through direct human contact. What happened at week 3? I asked. With Paul. With Rena. Paul stopped coming to work on day 16. Called in sick. I drove to his apartment. He was sitting in his living room with every window open, and he said he could hear the sirens talking to each other. All of them. All 114. He said they were discussing something. He said they'd been discussing it for years and they were almost finished. Discussing what? He said it was like an argument about a door. Whether to open it. What would come through. And Rena. Rena was different. Rena wasn't frightened. Rena was excited. She said the room she'd been shown was real. She said it was a place beneath the sound, beneath the frequency, a space that existed in the vibration itself. She said the sirens weren't the voice. They were the threshold. The steel wasn't conducting sound. It was holding a door open just wide enough for something to press its mouth against the crack. Carmen looked at me steadily. And she said the reason it takes people is that it can't open the door from its side. It needs someone to open it from ours. And to open it from ours, you have to be standing at the pole. And you have to answer. I went home. Nessa was cooking dinner. The apartment smelled like garlic and olive oil and normalcy, and the pulse in my chest was so strong that I could feel it in my teeth. You look terrible, Nessa said. I need to tell you something. I told her. All of it. Paul, Rena, the vibration, the radio, the shimmer, the pulse. I told her because she was the person I trusted most and because I was running out of time to be the person who could tell it coherently. Nessa listened to the whole thing. She asked precise questions. When did it start? What exactly did I feel? Had I seen a doctor? Had I slept? She was not dismissive. She was not afraid. She was diagnostic. When I finished, she said, "Show me." Show you what? The pulse. You said I could feel it before. Let me feel it now. I took her hand and placed it on my chest. She held it there for 10 seconds. 20. 30. I don't feel anything, she said. Just your heartbeat. It's between the beats. The second rhythm. She pressed harder. She closed her eyes. She concentrated. Darren, there's nothing there. I took her hand and held it against the wall. The apartment wall. Drywall over studs over exterior brick. Do you feel that? I said. Feel what? The vibration. She stared at me. I could feel it. Through the wall, through the studs, through the foundation, down into the earth, connected to every siren pole in the county through the bedrock itself. The whole city was humming. The whole flat, limestone over shale, ancient seabed geology of south-central Kansas was carrying a vibration that had nothing to do with sirens or steel or electricity. The sirens were just where it surfaced. Where the steel acted as an antenna, poking up through the skin of the world, and something underneath pressed against the opening. Nessa couldn't feel it. She couldn't hear it. She couldn't see the shimmer that I now saw around every vertical piece of steel, not just siren poles but streetlights, flagpoles, signposts, the rebar and concrete barriers. All of it faintly pulsing. All of it carrying the same signal. I think you need to see someone, Nessa said carefully. I know how this sounds. It sounds like you're having a stress reaction, and I want to help you, but I need you to be willing to consider that what you're experiencing might not be real. I know. I didn't say not real. I said it might not be external. She was being kind. She was being rational. She was being everything a good partner should be. And I could not prove her wrong, because the only evidence I had was inside my body, imperceptible to anyone who hadn't made the mistake I'd made. I called Carmen the next morning and told her I was going to take Nessa's advice. See a doctor. Get checked out. Approach this rationally. Carmen said, that's what Rena did. Week 2. I stopped. She saw her GP. Clean bill of health. She saw a cardiologist for the secondary pulse. Normal EKG. Normal echo. She saw an audiologist for the tinnitus. Normal audiogram. Every test came back clean because there's nothing wrong with your body, Darren. Your body is working perfectly. It's doing exactly what it was built to do. The problem is that now it's also doing something else. I didn't see a doctor. On June 15, 11 days after contact, I was lying in bed at 2 a.m. Nessa was asleep beside me. The pulse was strong, not painful, not even uncomfortable, but pervasive. It filled the room. It filled me. I could feel it in the mattress springs, in the metal bed frame, in the copper pipes in the wall. And I heard the voice again. Not through the radio this time. Through the steel frame of my own bed. The same structured, non-linguistic vocalization. Rising and falling with intention. Cadence without words. Emphasis without meaning I could decode. Except now, 11 days in, with the vibration running through me like a second nervous system, I caught something. Not a word. A shape. An image that arrived in my mind simultaneously with a specific passage of the sound, as though the sound itself carried a visual payload. A room. Dark. Not empty. Furnished with something that wasn't furniture. Warm. Clothes. Not like a prison. Like a throat. Like the inside of a living thing that had shaped itself into a space where a person could exist. And at the center of the room, a sound. The sound I'd been hearing for 11 days, except at full volume, at full resolution, unmediated by steel or bone or distance. The real version. The original. The thing the poles had been carrying a whisper of. And it was not a voice. It was a chorus. Hundreds of sources. Maybe thousands. All producing the same pattern, the same rhythm, the same pulsing call that I had been feeling in my chest. And I understood, not with my mind but with the part of me that now resonated in sympathy with it, that the chorus was not a recording. It was not a broadcast. It was a population. There were people in the room. Or there had been people, once, and they were now part of the sound, incorporated into the vibration the way a note is incorporated into a chord. Paul was in there. Rena was in there. And others, many others, from many cities, across many years. Everyone who had ever touched a pole and listened and answered. The image faded. The voice stopped. The pulse continued. I got out of bed. I stood in the kitchen in the dark. I looked out the window at the top of Siren 091, 3 blocks away, barely visible against the city glow. And I felt it calling. Not with menace. Not with hunger. With loneliness. With the desperate, suffocating need of something that has been trying to speak for longer than the sirens have existed, longer than the city has existed, and has only now, through the accidental architecture of steel poles sunk into the right geology at the right depth, found a way to reach us. And what it is saying, in the only medium it can use, is, come down. I am here. I have always been here. Come down and I will show you. I went to work the next morning. I drove my route. I wore my gloves. I did not touch any pole. I submitted my reports. I ate lunch in my truck and I stared at Siren 077's location on the map and the pulse in my chest hammered like a fist against a door. At 3 p.m., I drove to Coulter Park. I parked in the lot. I walked to the pole. The shimmer around it was so dense it looked like the air itself was breathing. The steel was vibrating so intensely I could see it, a blur at the edge of perception, like a guitar string caught mid-vibration but the size of a 40-foot pole. I took off my gloves. I put both hands on the pole. The vibration slammed into me like a wave. Not painful. Not violent, but total. Every bone in my body became a tuning fork. My vision whited out for a fraction of a second and then resolved, and I was still in Calder Park, still touching the pole, but I could see down. Through the pole. Through the concrete foundation. Through the bedrock. Down into a darkness that was not dark but full of the sound, full of the chorus, full of something vast and patient and aching that had been waiting in the limestone since before there was a Kansas, before there was a continent, waiting for anything vertical and conductive to breach the surface and let it whisper up. And it whispered. And I understood it. Not the content. The feeling. A single emotional transmission that bypassed language entirely and landed in my body like a physical sensation. Please. I let go of the pole. I stepped back. I walked to my truck. I drove to the shop. I found Carmen. I'm putting in my 2 weeks, I said. She looked at me for a long time. Then she nodded. Good, she said. That's the right choice. Is it enough? Will it stop? For Paul and Rena, it didn't. But they both answered it. You haven't answered it. I haven't answered it in words. Then don't. Don't go back to 077. Don't go back to any siren. Don't touch any steel that goes into the ground. And if you hear it at home, do not respond. Not out loud, not in your head, not in any way that could be interpreted as engagement. The conversation is only dangerous if it becomes a conversation. I worked my final 2 weeks with gloves and distance and a discipline that felt like holding my breath underwater. The pulse never stopped. The shimmer never faded. The voice came through the bed frame every night, and every night I lay rigid beside Nessa and did not respond. On my last day, June 29th, I turned in my equipment, my badge, and my keys. Carmen walked me to my truck. We stood in the parking lot in 96-degree heat and she hugged me, which she had never done before. Stay away from the poles, she said. I will. I mean all of them. Everywhere. Any city. The system is bigger than Wichita, Darren. The geology runs from here to Oklahoma City. Every siren in the corridor is sitting on the same formation. You go to Tulsa, to Oklahoma City, to anywhere on the Permian Basin shelf, and you'll feel it. Stay north. Stay on different rock. I moved. Not just out of Wichita, out of Kansas. Nessa and I drove to her sister's place in Duluth, Minnesota. Canadian shield granite. Different geology entirely. As far from the Permian Basin as I could get without leaving the country. The pulse faded. Not immediately. Over weeks. Like a radio station sliding out of range as you drive away. By mid-August, I couldn't feel it in my chest anymore. By September, the shimmer was gone from vertical steel. By October, I slept through the night without hearing anything in the bed frame. I thought I was free. In November, Duluth tested its outdoor warning sirens. The system is different here, different manufacturer, different infrastructure, different geology. Precambrian bedrock, not Permian limestone. There should be no connection. There is no connection, geologically, electrically, or institutionally. But when the sirens sounded, I felt it. Not the same frequency. Not the same rhythm. Something else. Something that used the same medium, steel poles sunk into stone, but carried a different signal. A different voice. A different population in a different room, separated from the first by a billion years of geology but connected by the same principle, that if you drive a steel column deep enough into the earth, something down there will find it and press its mouth against the opening. The test lasted 3 minutes. The all clear sounded at 1:02 p.m. The system returned to standby. The pulse in my chest started again at 1:03. Different cadence this time. Faster. More urgent. Not the patient, lonely call I'd felt in Kansas. Something hungrier. Something that had felt me arrive on its rock and had been waiting for the sirens to activate so it could reach me through the only channel it had. I am writing this from a coffee shop in Duluth. It is January. The next scheduled siren test is the first Wednesday of February. I have not touched a siren pole. I have not answered anything. The pulse runs through me every hour of every day, and the voice comes through the radiator pipes in our apartment every night, and I have begun to see the shimmer around the rebar in the parking ramp across the street. Carmen stopped returning my calls in December. I don't know if she's gone. I don't know if she went back to Wichita and answered the thing in the limestone. I don't know if the thing in the granite is the same thing or a different thing, or if the whole mantle of the earth is populated with intelligences that have been pressing against the crust for millennia, waiting for us to plant enough steel in the ground to give them a way to speak. I know this: I should never have measured it. I should never have touched the pole. I should have followed the 6th rule and walked away and told Carmen and no one else. But I also know that the rule was never going to save me. Because the rule was designed to prevent contact, and contact was inevitable. There are 114 sirens in Sedgwick County. There are 87 in Duluth. There are tens of thousands across the Great Plains and the Midwest and every other piece of geology that runs deep enough to reach whatever is down there. And every single one of them is maintained by someone who will, eventually, on a quiet afternoon, lean against the pole and feel something lean back. The 6 rules aren't a protection. They're a delay. And the thing about a delay is that it only works if you know what you're delaying. I don't. And the February test is in 11 days. And last night, for the first time, the voice in the radiator said my name. Not my name the way Nessa says it. Not the way Carmen said it, or Dispatch, or anyone I've ever known. My name the way a thing that has never heard a human voice would attempt it, assembled from vibration, shaped by pressure against metal, each syllable arriving as a separate physical event in the pipe. Dar. Ren. 2 pulses. 2 distinct compressions of steam-heated copper that should not have been able to produce anything resembling speech. I was lying in bed when it happened. 11:47 p.m., January 21st, Nessa was in the other room watching something on her laptop with headphones on. The apartment was quiet except for the usual winter sounds, the building settling, the wind off Lake Superior pressing against the windows, the radiator ticking as it cooled between heating cycles. Then the radiator clicked on. Normal. Thermostat regulated. I could hear the water moving through the baseboard unit, the familiar metallic expansion of copper warming up. And inside that sound, riding the thermal expansion like a signal on a carrier wave, Dar. Ren. I sat up. I put my hand on the radiator. The metal was warming, 90, maybe 95 degrees, climbing toward its normal operating temperature. And beneath the heat, beneath the ticking, the vibration. The same 2-second pulse. Except now it was modulated. Shaped. It had contours it hadn't had before. Not just rhythm, phonemes. It was learning. I pulled my hand away. The voice stopped. The radiator continued its normal cycle. I put my hand back. Dar. Ren. Clearer this time. Like it had saved my touch as a bookmark and resumed from exactly where it left off. I pulled away. Sat on the edge of the bed. Stared at the radiator. 12 inches of copper baseboard running along the exterior wall, connected to the building's hydronic heating system, which was connected to the boiler in the basement, which was connected to the gas lines, which were connected to the municipal infrastructure, which was buried in the granite bedrock of the Duluth complex. Steel and copper and iron, all the way down. I did not touch the radiator again that night. I did not sleep. At 6 a.m., I got dressed and drove to the Duluth Public Library on Superior Street, because I needed to understand something and I needed to understand it without using my apartment's Wi-Fi, which ran through cables that ran through conduit that ran through the walls and into the ground. I know how that sounds. I know it sounds like the reasoning of a person who has lost the ability to distinguish between rational caution and paranoia. I want to acknowledge that. I want to be clear that I was aware, even then, that my behavior had begun to resemble the behavior of someone in crisis. I was making decisions based on a model of reality that no one else shared. I was avoiding contact with infrastructure. I was suspicious of pipes. But the voice had said my name. And it had said it from inside a heating system that had no physical connection to any siren, any warning system, any emergency infrastructure of any kind. Which meant one of two things: either the phenomenon was not limited to sirens and had never been limited to sirens, and the poles were just the loudest channel in an omnipresent medium, or I had deteriorated past the point where the source of the sound mattered, because my own nervous system was now generating it. Both explanations terrified me. The first because it meant there was no safe distance. The second because it meant there was no safe mind. At the library, I used a public terminal to search for missing persons cases in counties with outdoor warning siren infrastructure. I was looking for a pattern: technicians, maintenance workers, anyone connected to siren systems who had disappeared without explanation. I found more than I expected. In 2011, a City of Tulsa emergency management technician named Gerald Watts was reported missing after failing to return from a siren maintenance call. His truck was found at the site. Tools packed. Phone on the seat. No evidence of foul play. Case open. In 2014, a contractor working for the Omaha Office of Emergency Management disappeared during a post-storm damage assessment of outdoor warning units. Robert Chen. Same pattern. Vehicle found at the last siren on his route. Personal effects in order. No trace. In 2017, a county employee in Topeka. In 2018, 2 in Oklahoma City, same month, different agencies. In 2020, 1 in Wichita, which I already knew about, Paul Montoya. In 2021, 1 in Lincoln, Nebraska. In 2022, Rena Okafor. 8 people. 8 cities. All on the Permian Basin shelf or its margins. All connected to outdoor warning siren maintenance. All vanished from siren locations. All leaving behind vehicles, tools, and personal effects in a state of calm completion, as though they had finished their work and simply stepped away from the physical world. I printed the search results. 43 pages. I folded them into my coat and drove home. That evening, I laid the pages out on the kitchen table. Nessa watched me from the doorway. What is all this? Missing persons cases. Siren technicians. 8 of them. Same pattern across 8 cities. She came closer. She picked up a page. She read it. Darren, these are from different states. Different years. Different departments. Same geology. Same, she put the page down. You think the rock did this? I think something in the rock did this. Something that uses the steel to reach people. And I think the sirens are the loudest path, but not the only path. I think it can use anything that goes deep enough. Nessa sat down across from me. She was quiet for a long time. She picked up another page, then another. She read them with the same clinical attention she brought to everything. These cases aren't connected, she said. Not officially. Different jurisdictions, different investigations. Nobody's drawn a line between them. Nobody's looking for the line. Because the line doesn't exist outside your head, Darren. She wasn't cruel about it. She said it the way you'd say it to someone you loved who was slipping and you were trying to hold on. I could hear the effort in her voice, the determination to be honest even though honesty meant telling me I might be losing my mind. You might be right, I said. I want to be wrong. I want you to show me something I can hold and verify and point to. But you can't. Everything you're describing, the vibration, the voice, the shimmer, it only exists for you. And the cases on this table are missing persons reports that could mean anything. They could. So what are you going to do? I didn't have an answer. I stacked the pages and put them in a drawer and we ate dinner and we didn't talk about it again that night. But I kept researching. Not at home, at the library, on public terminals, using only hard copy printouts. Over the next 9 days, I expanded the search. I wasn't just looking for missing technicians anymore. I was looking for the infrastructure itself. What I found was this: outdoor warning sirens in the central United States are mounted, almost universally, on galvanized steel poles set in concrete foundations that penetrate between 4 and 8 feet into the ground. In the Great Plains, that means the foundation sits directly on or within the region's dominant sedimentary geology, limestone, shale, sandstone, and the deeper Permian and Pennsylvanian formations that underlie everything from central Texas to southern Nebraska. The geology is not uniform, but it is connected. The Permian Basin isn't a basin in the topographic sense, it's a geological formation, a deep layer of ancient sedimentary rock that stretches across hundreds of thousands of square miles. And every siren pole in that region is, in a functional sense, a steel rod driven into the same body. I found something else. In 2009, the USGS published a minor paper on anomalous infrasonic readings detected by a seismic monitoring station near El Reno, Oklahoma. The readings were consistent with a deep origin vibration, not seismic activity, not drilling, not traffic, originating at an estimated depth of 6 to 9 miles and registering at a frequency of approximately 0.7 Hz, below the range of human hearing. Below the range of most instrumentation. The paper noted the readings as unexplained but non-recurring and recommended further monitoring. I requested the follow-up data through a public records inquiry. The response, which took 3 weeks, was a single page. No follow-up monitoring was conducted. Station decommissioned in 2012. 0.7 Hz. A cycle every 1.4 seconds. Not quite the 2-second cycle I'd felt in the poles. But close. Close enough that the difference could be accounted for by the distance and the medium, the way a sound changes as it travels through miles of stone and then up through steel and then into the body of a person who has made himself into a receiver. On January 30th, 2 days before the February siren test, I drove to the Duluth Emergency Management Office on West Michigan Street. I did not have an appointment. I walked in and asked to speak with whoever was responsible for the outdoor warning system. I was directed to a man named Keith Olafson, the city's emergency preparedness coordinator. He was in his 50s, friendly, slightly confused by my presence. I told him I was a former siren technician from Kansas who had relocated to Duluth and was interested in the local system's maintenance protocols. Keith was happy to talk. He showed me the city's siren map, 87 units across the city and surrounding townships. Federal Signal and Whelan, same manufacturers I'd worked with. Monthly tests, first Wednesday of every month, 1 p.m. Radio activated from the 911 center. I asked about his maintenance staff. We contracted out, he said. Company called Northern Emergency Systems out of Minneapolis. They come up quarterly for the full inspection. We handle the monthly tests ourselves. Have you ever had any issues with the poles? Vibration, unusual readings. Not that I'm aware of. The contractor handles all the technical stuff. We just push the button. Has anyone on the contractor's crew ever reported anything unusual? Not equipment faults, physical sensations. Vibration in the steel. Anything subaudible. Keith gave me the look. The look that Nessa gave me when I told her about the pipes. The look that says, I am being patient with you because you seem like a reasonable person, but you are asking an unreasonable question. I can't speak to what the contractor's people experience, he said. But I've been doing this for 19 years and I've never had a complaint about vibrating poles. 19 years. That's right. And in that time, has anyone on the contract crew, anyone at all, gone missing? Left the job unexpectedly. Failed to return from a maintenance visit. The look sharpened. Keith sat up straighter. Why are you asking me that? Because in my last position, 2 technicians disappeared from siren locations. And I've found 6 more cases across the Great Plains with the same pattern. I'm not accusing anyone of anything. I'm asking if you've seen the same thing here. Keith was quiet for a long time. Then he pulled open a desk drawer, took out a manila folder, and set it on the desk between us. In 2019, he said, a contractor tech named Anita Birdsong was doing the fall inspection cycle. She completed 11 of her 14 assigned sites on a Tuesday. She radioed Northern Emergency's dispatcher at 4:12 p.m. from Siren 54 at Chester Park and reported all clear. She was due at Siren 55 at Lincoln Park by 4:45. He opened the folder. Inside was a photocopy of a missing persons report filed with the Duluth Police Department. Her van was found at the Chester Park site the next morning. Not at Lincoln Park. At Chester Park. She'd never left. Tools in the van. Tablet on the passenger seat. Jacket folded on the driver's seat. Same pattern, I said. I don't know what you mean by pattern. I know that a person I'd worked with for 3 years went to a siren location and didn't come home and nobody ever found out why. The police investigated. Northern Emergency cooperated fully. There was nothing. Did anyone check the pole? Check it for what? For vibration. Subaudible output. Anything unusual in the steel itself? Keith stared at me. Then he closed the folder. Mr. Yates, I'm going to be honest with you. You're the 3rd person who's come to me with a version of this question. The first was Anita Birdsong's mother, about a year after Anita disappeared. She'd found something on the internet, a forum or a blog, I don't remember, where someone was claiming that siren poles in the Midwest were conducting some kind of underground signal. She wanted to know if I'd checked the poles. I told her I hadn't, because there was nothing to check. And the second person, a woman from Wichita, called me on the phone about 8 months ago. She said she was a siren technician and she was doing research on missing maintenance workers. She asked the exact same questions you're asking. Carmen. What did you tell her? Same thing I told you. Same thing I told Mrs. Birdsong. There's nothing wrong with the poles. Did you check? I walked out to the nearest siren after Mrs. Birdsong's visit. Siren 12, over on 4th Street. I put my hand on it. Cold steel. Nothing else. You didn't feel anything. I felt a cold pole in November. Okay. I stood up. I thanked him. I walked to the door. Mr. Yates. I turned. The woman from Wichita. Carmen Reyes. She called me a second time, about 3 months ago. Late at night. She said she'd changed her mind about something and she needed to go back. I didn't understand what she meant. She said, and I wrote this down because it disturbed me, she said, it's not what I thought it was. It's not taking them. They're going. And I think they're right to go. He opened the folder again and pulled out a handwritten note on a post-it. She asked me to tell anyone who came asking, the 6th rule was wrong. Don't stay away. Stay close. And when it says your name, answer. Because the room is real and it isn't empty and the people in it aren't gone. They're just finally where the sound always meant for them to be. I drove home. I sat in the parking lot of our apartment building for 40 minutes. The pulse was the strongest it had ever been, not a passenger frequency anymore but the dominant signal, my own heartbeat reduced to the secondary rhythm, the thing in the ground hammering through me with the full confidence of something that knows it will be heard. I could see the shimmer on every vertical piece of metal in my field of vision. The light poles in the parking lot. The chain-link fence around the dumpster enclosure. The flagpole in front of the Lutheran church across the street. All of it shimmering, all of it pulsing, all of it connected through the frozen granite beneath the snow to something that was waiting. Carmen had changed her mind. Carmen, who had spent 11 years building the rules, enforcing the rules, hiding her notes in her truck because she was afraid to let the information touch any system. Carmen had gone back. And she'd sent a message. Not through the poles. Through a man at a desk in Duluth, who wrote it on a post-it and put it in a folder and waited for the next person to walk through his door. The February test was the day after tomorrow. First Wednesday of the month. 1 p.m. 87 sirens across the city, all activated simultaneously. I went upstairs. Nessa was in the kitchen, reading. I talked to the emergency management office, I said. She looked up. There's a missing contractor tech here. Same pattern. 2019, and Carmen called this office before she disappeared. She left a message. What message? I told her. Nessa put her book down and stared at me with an expression I hadn't seen before, not skepticism, not patience, not clinical concern. Something raw. You're going to go to one of the sirens during the test, she said. I haven't decided that. Yes, you have. She was right. I'd decided in Keith Olafson's office, the moment he read Carmen's words off that post-it note. Not because the words were reassuring. They weren't. The room is real and it isn't empty and the people in it aren't gone. That's not reassurance. That's a description from someone who has already crossed over and is speaking from the other side. But Carmen was not a person who was easy to fool. 11 years of disciplined caution. 2 disappearances witnessed at close range. A rule system built from bitter experience. If something had changed her mind, it wasn't persuasion. It was evidence. Or it was the thing itself, speaking through her. Using her voice the way it used the steel, as a medium. Shaping her words the way it shaped the vibration, into something that sounded like an invitation because it knew that's what would bring me to the pole. I couldn't tell the difference. That's the part that stays with me. February 2nd. The day before the test. I drove around the city. I visited 12 siren sites without stopping, without getting out of the truck. I just looked at them. 12 steel poles, each one shimmering in my vision, each one pulsing in my chest. At Siren 54, Chester Park, where Anita Birdsong was last seen, I slowed down. The pole was at the edge of the parking lot, near a stand of birch trees. The snow around it was undisturbed. The siren head sat motionless against a gray sky. The shimmer around this pole was different. Denser. More structured. It didn't look like heat distortion, it looked like something pressing against a membrane from the other side. A shape without features, pushing outward through the air around the steel, testing the boundary. I drove away. That night, I lay in bed next to Nessa. She was awake. We were both awake. If I go, I said, and something happens. Don't. Nessa. Don't go. Please. Whatever you think is in the ground, whatever Carmen said, whatever you're feeling, don't go to a siren and put your hands on it during an active test. That's the one thing every version of your rules says not to do. The rules might be wrong. Or the rules might be the only reason you're still here. She rolled over and faced me. Her eyes were wet. I can't feel what you feel, she said. I can't hear it. I can't see it. I only have you. And you're telling me that something underground said your name and your dead colleague told you to answer, and you want to go. And I'm telling you that from where I'm standing, you sound like someone being lured. I know. Then stay. Okay. I said okay. I meant it when I said it. February 3rd. First Wednesday of the month. I went to work. I'd taken a facilities maintenance job at the university, nothing to do with sirens, nothing to do with emergency systems. I clocked in at 7 a.m. I replaced a ballast in a corridor light fixture. I fixed a running toilet in Kirby Student Center. I ate lunch at my desk. At 12:48 p.m., I was standing in the maintenance shop, sorting hardware into bins. 12 minutes before the test. The pulse in my chest accelerated. Not gradually, a single step change, like a drumbeat shifting to double time. I braced myself against the workbench. The vibration moved from my chest into my arms. Into my hands. Into my fingers. I could feel every piece of metal in the room, the wrenches on the pegboard, the steel shelving, the bolts in my hand, humming in sympathy. Not with my heartbeat. With the other rhythm. The deeper one. The one from 6 miles down. 12:52 p.m. I put down the hardware. I walked to my truck. I drove south on Mesaba Avenue. 12:56 p.m. I could feel every siren pole in the city. All 87. A constellation of steel, each one vibrating at the edge of activation, the electronic systems still dormant but the poles themselves already alive. Already carrying the signal. The test hadn't started yet and the ground beneath Duluth was already singing. 12:59 p.m. I pulled into the Chester Park lot. Siren 54. I got out of the truck. The air was 14 degrees. My breath was visible. The pole stood 40 feet tall against a sky the color of a lake. The shimmer was gone. The air around the pole was perfectly still. For the first time in weeks, I couldn't see the distortion. But I could feel it. Everywhere. In my feet through the frozen ground. In my hands through the air. In my chest, where the pulse had become so strong it was no longer a sensation but a sound, a deep, internal roar, like standing inside a bell. 1 p.m. The sirens activated. All 87, simultaneously. The wail rose across the city, that unmistakable, climbing, falling tone that every person in tornado country knows in their bones. 120 decibels at the source, falling off with distance but overlapping, reinforcing, until the entire city existed inside a single sound. I stood at the base of the pole. The siren above me was at full output. The sound was physical, it pressed against my skin, vibrated my clothing, filled my lungs with pressure. And beneath it, riding the same steel, using the same path, amplified by the same energy that drove the siren speakers, the other sound. The real sound. The one that had been whispering through my chest for 2 months. At full volume now. At full resolution. It was not a voice. It was not a chorus. It was a place. Carmen had been right and wrong simultaneously. It wasn't a room you could see. It was a room you could hear. A space defined entirely by sound, the way a cave is defined by stone. An acoustic architecture, vast and structured and inhabited, built from vibration in the deep rock, and now, for 3 minutes, with every siren pole in the city acting as a speaker, fully audible to anyone tuned to receive it. I was tuned. I had been tuned since June. I could hear rooms. Corridors. Open spaces. I could hear movement within them, not footsteps but the displacement of sound by solid forms, the way a person's body casts an acoustic shadow. Dozens of shadows. Hundreds. Moving through the space with purpose. Not lost. Not trapped. Functioning. And one of them, one specific shadow, one disruption in the pattern, moved toward me. Through the sound. Up through the rock. Up through the steel. And pressed against the boundary between the vibration and the air the way a hand presses against glass. I took off my gloves. I put my hands on the pole. The boundary dissolved. For 1 second, maybe 2, I was in both places simultaneously. Standing in Chester Park with my hands on frozen steel, and standing inside the sound, inside the architecture, inside the living space that existed in the vibration beneath the city. And the shadow in front of me resolved into something that was not a shape but a recognition. A familiarity. A pattern of movement and emphasis and pause that I knew the way you know a colleague's footsteps in a hallway. Carmen. Not her face. Not her voice. Her rhythm. The way she held attention. The way she occupied a space, carefully, completely, without wasted motion. She was there. She was present. She was not diminished. And she was waiting for me. The sirens deactivated at 1:03 p.m. The sound dropped away. The connection severed. I was standing in a parking lot in Duluth with my bare hands on a pole in 14-degree weather, and the most profound silence I have ever experienced settled over me like snowfall. I let go. I stood there. My hands were red from the cold. My chest was empty, not just quiet but empty. The pulse was gone. For the first time since June 4th, the thing in my sternum was silent. I drove home. I sat at the kitchen table. Nessa was at work. The apartment was quiet. No pulse in the radiator. No vibration in the pipes. No shimmer on any surface. The silence lasted 4 hours. At 5:17 p.m., it came back. Not the old pulse, something new. A pattern I hadn't felt before. Faster, more complex, with subrhythms inside it that suggested grammar. Suggested syntax. Suggested that whatever had pressed against the boundary during the test had not retreated afterward but had advanced, pushed closer, found a wider crack. It has been 3 weeks since the test. The new pattern has not stopped. It does not require contact with steel anymore. I can feel it in the wood of the kitchen table. In the concrete of the sidewalk. In the water in the pipes. It is everywhere, because it was always everywhere. The steel was just loud enough to notice. Nessa has started to feel it. She told me last Tuesday. She was lying in bed, and she put her hand on her chest, and she looked at me, and she said, "What is that?" I didn't answer. Not because I don't know. Because answering is how it opens wider. Because every person who understands the pattern becomes another surface the sound can press against. Another bridge. Another crack in the boundary between the acoustic space and the physical one. The March test is in 9 days. I have not decided whether I will go to a poll. I have not decided because the decision may no longer be mine to make. The pulse in my chest aligns with the city's siren test schedule the way a tide aligns with the moon, automatically, gravitationally, without negotiation. Carmen's message said the room is real and the people aren't gone. I believe her. I heard them. I felt them. I recognized her. But I also know that the thing in the ground said please. And I know that please is the most dangerous word any living thing can say, because it means the door doesn't open from its side. It needs us. It has always needed us. And it has been patient enough to bury itself beneath a continent and wait for us to plant steel in the stone and come close enough to hear. The 6 rules were meant to prevent this. They failed. Not because they were wrong but because they assumed the phenomenon was avoidable. It isn't. It's geological. It's infrastructural. It lives in the connection between metal and stone, and we have spent a century driving metal into stone across every populated acre of the plains. I am not writing this as a warning. Warnings are for things that can be avoided. I am writing this as a record. Because Nessa can feel it now. And if she can feel it, without ever touching a siren pole, without ever being a technician, without ever making any of the mistakes I made, then the boundary is thinner than I thought. And it is thinning on its own. The next test is March 5th, 1 p.m. I will be at Chester Park. I already know this the way I know my heartbeat, not as a decision but as a rhythm. Something I am already doing. Something I have always been doing, since the moment I put my hand on the pole in Calder Park and felt something underneath press back with a patience that told me it had been waiting longer than I could comprehend and would wait longer still, but would prefer not to. The radiator just clicked on. 11:43 p.m. The water is moving through the copper. And inside the sound of the water, very clearly, in a voice that is learning faster than I am forgetting. Nessa. I closed my eyes. The pulse aligned. 2 names now. 2 cracks in the same door. The sirens are tested on the first Wednesday of every month in every city in this country. Millions of steel poles, sunk into the rock, activated simultaneously, for 3 minutes. Every month, the door opens a little wider. Every month, the sound on the other side gets a little clearer. And every month, more people start to feel it. Check your chest. Right now. Between the beats. If there's a second rhythm, something slow, something patient, something that doesn't belong to you, then you already know what I'm going to say next. Don't measure it. Don't touch the pole. And whatever you do, when it says your name, and it will, don't answer. The rules won't save you. But they'll buy you time. And time is the only thing I have left to give.